On a cold Christmas Eve, two curious figures are about to uncover a buried truth that could change everything. What's hidden beneath the surface of an ancient mansion, sealed in velvet and gold, something more dangerous than treasure itself. As they dig deeper, every clue pulls them closer to a shocking revelation. But one question remains: who can you trust when secrets are buried in the past? "I've always wondered," said Clara, pacing restlessly around the office, "why no one ever seems to care about the lives of clergymen's daughters." "What's got you thinking about that?" asked Lucas, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, I've been one myself," Clara replied, a hint of bitterness in her voice. "I remember how it felt, living in the shadow of expectations and untold secrets. It's what drives me, this need to reach out, to understand. I guess it's the desire to solve mysteries that aren't mine, but might as well be." "You're trying to sound like Detective Granger," Lucas teased, folding his arms. "If you ask me, you talk nearly as much as he does, but without the flair." "Well," Clara said with a sly smile, "there's a certain finesse in my words that no blunt detective could manage. But let's not get sidetracked. What matters is this. Today I'm going to find the one thing no one's considered: a clergyman's daughter seeking the help of Granger's investigations." "A bet then?" Lucas raised his eyebrows. "I bet you'll fail." "Done," Clara replied confidently. The door swung open with a creak as Albert stepped in. Miss Eleanor Ward, a frail young woman, her features drawn and her clothes worn, entered hesitantly, her eyes scanning the room like someone who wasn't sure she belonged. Clara stood up immediately, her gaze sharpening. "Good morning, Miss Ward. Please, have a seat. What brings you to our office?" I need help," Eleanor stammered. Clara's eyes gleamed with interest. "Ah, a story I'm certain will keep us on our toes. I do hope you won't mind my curiosity. Your father was a clergyman, wasn't he?" The girl's face stiffened in surprise. "Yes, he was. How did you know?" "We have our ways," Clara said, giving Lucas a knowing look. "You see, Mr. Granger finds inspiration in the oddest places. We must always keep our minds open." Eleanor hesitated, her face pale but her eyes filled with desperation. "My name is Eleanor Ward. My father was the rector of All Saints in a small village. When he passed away suddenly 2 years ago, my life was turned upside down. My mother fell ill soon after, and it became my responsibility to care for her, but we had no money. Then out of nowhere, we received a letter from a lawyer. It told me that I had inherited a large sum from a distant relative, someone I never even knew existed. But it didn't stop there. There were conditions I don't understand." Clara leaned forward, her intrigue piqued. "Conditions? Tell us more." Eleanor looked down, her voice trembling. "I don't know why, but something about the inheritance feels wrong. There are too many unanswered questions, and I fear someone wants me to take what's mine, for reasons I can't fathom. Something is hidden, something dangerous, and I don't know how to stop it." Eleanor's voice trembled slightly as she continued her tale. "I was always told that life would get better with time, but that didn't happen. My aunt, who had a quarrel with my father many years ago, was a wealthy woman, and I thought we were finally going to be relieved of our troubles. When she passed away, I was left with the house she had lived in. At first it seemed like a dream come true. Her inheritance, despite being a distant relative, was going to lift us out of the poverty we had struggled with. But as with all things that seem too good to be true, nothing turned out the way we hoped. After paying off some small debts and legacies, there was no money left to speak of." She paused, her eyes clouding over. "It seemed like my aunt had either lost her fortune during the war, or spent it all living on her savings. Still, we had the house, an old neglected place with a mysterious air. Almost immediately, we received an offer to sell it for a very good price, but I refused. Perhaps it was foolish, but I thought it would be better to stay there. My mother needed a stable place to live. We could take in paying guests to make ends meet." Eleanor's lips tightened as she recalled her decision. "We moved in, and for a time things seemed to go smoothly. We found a few tenants, and my aunt's old servant agreed to stay with us to help out. But that's when the strange things began to happen." "What sort of strange things?" Clara asked, leaning forward, her curiosity piqued. "It's hard to explain. The house, well, it felt haunted. At first it was little things, pictures falling off the walls, chairs being found overturned. Then one night, We were sitting down to dinner, and we heard a loud crash from above. We rushed upstairs to find furniture thrown to the ground, but no one was there. It wasn't just a simple accident. Something felt wrong. The disturbances got worse. Sometimes we would hear footsteps when no one was around. A dreadful, eerie chill seemed to linger in the air. At first we thought someone was playing tricks on us, but after a while, I realized we were dealing with something far darker. Clara's mind raced, the mystery deepening with every word. You thought it was a ghost? Yes, that's what Dr. O'Neill suggested. He's a member of the Society for Physical Research. He came by a few days ago, intrigued by the rumors of strange happenings in the house. He proposed buying the place from us and conducting his own experiments. Eleanor's eyes lowered as she spoke, a hint of unease in her expression. It seemed like the perfect solution. He would take the house off our hands, and in return we could finally escape the chaos. But, she trailed off, her voice wavering. Clara leaned in closer. But what, Eleanor? Perhaps I'm imagining it, Eleanor said, her voice a mere whisper. Perhaps I'm being too paranoid. But when Dr. O'Neill left, something felt off. His interest wasn't just in the house. It was almost like he knew something that we didn't. Something that made me feel like we were being led into a trap. The house, the inheritance, the strange occurrences. Nothing makes sense anymore. Monica Dane, a young woman grappling with the unsettling mysteries surrounding her inherited family home, sat nervously across from Tuppence, the detective who had agreed to investigate. Her tale began with a curious man named Dr. O'Neill, who had approached her with an offer to buy the house after a series of bizarre occurrences. Furniture flying, lights flickering without reason, and strange noises that seemed to echo from nowhere. It all pointed to something far more sinister than a mere haunting. But what struck Monica as even stranger was a peculiar sense of déjà vu. Dr. O'Neill, despite appearing much older, and with a drastically different demeanor than the previous young man who had shown interest in purchasing the house, bore striking physical similarities: the same gold tooth, the same unusual ears. A chilling thought gnawed at Monica's mind. Could it be the same man in disguise? With this unsettling connection weighing heavily on her, she turned to the detectives for help. As the investigation unfolded, more questions arose. Who was Dr. O'Neill really, and what secrets did he conceal behind those identical traits? Tuppence, intrigued by the mystery, suggested they dig deeper, aware that something far darker might be lurking beneath the surface of Monica's inherited house. The tension grew as the web of deception and possible identity theft began to unravel, and Monica's personal entanglement with two suitors, a wealthy one and a poor, yet charming one, added another layer of complexity to her predicament. There was more at stake than just a haunted house. Her future and the truth behind the eerie manifestations were all at risk. Monica's dilemma weighed heavily on her. Despite her family's financial struggles, selling the house wouldn't be enough to change their situation. Gerald, a dear man but desperately poor, had immense potential, but lacked the capital to make his engineering firm thrive. On the other hand, Mr. Partridge, well off and earnest, could solve all their financial problems with a marriage. Yet, the thought left Monica cold. Marrying for security didn't feel right. Tuppence, understanding the conflict, leaned in and offered her usual blend of wit and empathy. "It's not the same thing at all, is it?" she said knowingly. "You can tally up his virtues as much as you like, but it's like counting beans. There's no passion in it." Monica sighed, torn between heart and practicality. Tuppence, ever pragmatic, suggested they visit the Red House in Starton in the marsh. The mystery of the house was as alluring as it was troubling, and Tuppence knew it was more than just a family dilemma. It was a puzzle that begged to be solved. As the two women discussed the next steps, Tommy, ever the skeptic, floated his theory. "It's probably the invalid mother," he said with a half-smirk. Tuppence was unimpressed, but Tommy's thoughts had merit. If the poltergeist activity was staged, someone must have orchestrated it, and he suspected the most unlikely culprit. But Tuppence, determined to get to the heart of the matter, was having none of it. "We must uncover why someone is so desperate to own this house, Tommy. There's something deeply unsettling about all this, and I won't stop until we figure it out." Tommy, ever supportive, agreed but couldn't resist teasing her. "Fine, Tuppence, let's dive into the mystery. But whatever happens, I'm not letting you off the hook when I find out who's behind this." The investigation was only just beginning, but the sense of danger surrounding the house seemed to grow with each passing moment. Tommy's mind was racing with possibilities as he shared his latest findings with Tuppence. "Imagine if there's a hidden fortune beneath the red house," he mused. "A buried treasure, or maybe something more valuable than anyone could anticipate." But Tuppence was quick to shake her head. "No, Tommy, it must be something more than treasure, something even more elusive, a mystery waiting to unfold." With a mischievous glint in his eye, Tommy decided to pay a visit to the local bank manager. There, in the midst of small talk about holiday plans and potential property acquisitions, Tommy carefully steered the conversation towards the curious habits of eccentric old ladies. He mentioned an aunt who'd purchased a mountain of hams during the war, and led the conversation naturally toward a strange client of the bank, a woman who'd withdrawn her life savings, mostly in gold, and insisted on taking possession of her securities. The bank manager, unaware of Tommy's intentions, casually revealed that the woman was the previous owner of the red house. A light bulb flicked on in Tommy's mind. She hid it. Tuppence, the gold, the securities, they're buried somewhere in that house, and someone knows it. The pieces started to fall into place. Tommy suspected Crockett, the faithful housekeeper, and her shady nephew, Dr. O'Neill, might be after this hidden treasure. But where could she have hidden it? Tuppence thought about it, then suggested the obvious: under mattresses, in stockings, in hidden nooks only an old lady could think to conceal things. Tommy wasn't entirely convinced. The house had been searched, and yet the treasure remained elusive. "No, they haven't found it yet, but they will, and once they do, they'll have the means to make the red house their own." The urgency of the situation pushed them to act quickly. With renewed determination, Tommy and Tuppence set off to the red house, where Monica Dean greeted them, and they were shown through the mansion's eerie halls. Tommy kept his suspicions to himself, carefully observing the people around him, but his mind kept returning to the mysterious gold and the secret that lay within the walls. Crockett, too, seemed to be hiding something, and Tommy couldn't shake the feeling that they were all just one step away from uncovering the truth. Tommy and Tuppence delved deeper into the mystery of the red house, their eyes keenly observing every little detail. As Monica led them through the mansion, Tommy questioned her about the papers left behind by her aunt. "Are there any papers that could hold a clue?" he asked. Monica was unsure, but she mentioned a drawer filled with old papers in her aunt's bedroom. "Nothing of real importance, just old receipts and recipes," she said. "But my mother never likes to throw anything away." Tommy's interest piqued, and he pressed further. "And the gardener, was he here during your aunt's time?" Monica confirmed he had been, though only 3 days a week. The old man now lived in the village, too frail to be of much help. This seemed to spark a thought in Tommy's mind. He asked Monica to stay behind while he approached the gardener, hoping to learn something new. As he casually struck up a conversation, Tommy dropped a seemingly innocent question. "You buried a box for her once, didn't you?" The gardener looked at him with confusion.
"No, sir."
"Never buried no box for her," he replied, his face unreadable. Tommy wasn't convinced, but he didn't press further. Back inside the house, Monica had brought down a large cardboard box filled with papers. "I've collected everything," she whispered, handing it to Tommy, "though I doubt you'll find anything that explains the strange happenings here." Just as she spoke, there was a loud crash from upstairs. Tommy rushed up to find a jug and basin shattered on the floor, with no one in sight. He couldn't help but grin. "Seems like the ghost is at it again," he muttered under his breath. But something about it felt too deliberate, too staged. His suspicions were growing. Tommy returned downstairs thoughtfully, requesting a moment alone with Crockett, the maid. Monica agreed, and fetched her. With the maid standing before him, Tommy asked with his most charming smile, "We're considering buying the house, and my wife wondered if you'd like to stay on as our housekeeper." Crockett's face remained stoic, betraying no emotion. "Thank you, sir," she replied evenly. "I'll need to think it over." Tommy wasn't finished. Turning to Monica, he casually added, "I'm truly impressed with the house, Miss Dean. I understand there's another offer on the table, but I'm willing to pay 100 more than the other buyer." Monica's response was non-committal, her face unreadable, but Tommy knew he had struck a nerve. With their business concluded, they took their leave, but Tommy couldn't shake the feeling that the pieces were slowly falling into place. "I was right," he muttered to Tuppence, as they stepped outside, certain now that the house held more than just a few family secrets. There was something much darker buried beneath its walls, and he was going to find it. As Tommy and Tuppence made their way down the long driveway, Tommy turned to his wife with a knowing glance. "Crockett's definitely involved in this," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "Did you notice how out of breath she was? That's because she was rushing down the back stairs after smashing the jug and basin. She's covering for her nephew, I'm sure of it. He's probably the one behind all the strange events, staging them while she keeps up the innocent act with the family. It all makes sense. You'll see, Doctor. O'Neill will increase his offer before the day is out." And just as Tommy predicted, after dinner, a note arrived from Monica, confirming Dr. O'Neill had raised his offer by another £150. Tommy raised an eyebrow. The nephew must be quite wealthy, he mused, his tone filled with intrigue. Whatever he's after, it's clearly worth a lot more than we've been led to believe. Tuppence, her curiosity piqued, sighed in frustration. "Oh, if only we could find out what it is." Tommy smiled. "Well, let's roll up our sleeves and get to work." The two of them dove into the overwhelming task of sorting through the jumbled box of papers. Each item they pulled out seemed more mundane than the last. A few old receipts, a recipe for lemon cheesecake, an article about pearls, and a rather peculiar poem about spring. "It's heartbreaking," Tuppence lamented, as she sifted through the endless pile. Hours passed, and their progress seemed painfully slow. At last, Tommy's hand fell on a piece of paper that made him pause. "This one's different," he said, picking up a half sheet of notepaper. "I don't know why, but it struck me as odd." Tuppence leaned in, her interest piqued. Tommy read the strange little rhyme aloud. "My first you put on glowing coal, and into it you put my whole. My second really is the first. My third mislikes the winter blast." Tommy said after a moment, frowning. Not much of a poet, was he? Tuppence raised an eyebrow. "I don't see what's peculiar about it. Everyone used to have little puzzles like this, back in the day, a bit of fun for winter nights." But Tommy wasn't interested in the verse itself. It was the text written underneath that caught his attention. "St. Luke 9, he read aloud. "That's a Bible verse. That's a bit odd." Tuppence mused, flipping the page over in thought. Why would an elderly lady, especially one with a religious bent, write a Bible verse under a charade like that? Tommy's eyes sparkled with realization. "Exactly. That's not something you'd expect from just anyone. Let me see your Bible, Tuppence." A smile played on her lips. "As a matter of fact, I do have one with me." She sprang into action, rummaging through her suitcase and pulling out a small worn red Bible. "Aha, just what I needed," she said with a grin, sitting down at the table and flipping to the appropriate passage in St. Luke. "Look at this, Tommy," she said, her finger tracing the text as it aligned with the puzzle's peculiar rhyme. The truth was beginning to take shape in their minds, and it was more dangerous and mysterious than they had ever anticipated. This was no ordinary treasure hunt. They were on the brink of uncovering something far more sinister and valuable than they could have imagined. Tommy and Tuppence had been combing through the box of papers for hours, the search dragging on like an endless puzzle with no clear solution. Just when they were about to give up, Tuppence made a startling connection. "Wait, Tommy, don't you see it? This cryptic message. It's all pointing to something much bigger." With her mind racing, she quickly picked up the half sheet of notepaper Tommy had earlier discarded, her eyes scanning the strange riddle inscribed on it. The verses seemed like a harmless bit of poetic nonsense, but something about the accompanying note beneath it caught her attention, an obscure biblical reference. St. Luke 11:9. "Seek and ye shall find," she read aloud, a chill running down her spine as the phrase clicked in her mind. This wasn't just an ordinary rhyme, it was a clue. Tommy leaned in, intrigued as Tuppence frantically flipped through her small red Bible, pointing to the passage. She was right. It had to mean something. The verse wasn't just a random Bible quote, it was a key. "If we can crack the riddle, we'll find the treasure, or whatever it is Monica's looking for," Tuppence said, her voice a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "Tommy, ever the skeptic, wasn't entirely convinced, but he couldn't deny the fire in Tuppence's eyes. As they tackled the cryptic poem together, it became clear that the meaning was more elusive than they'd first thought. "My first you put on glowing coal," what could that mean? They played with the idea of different words, trying everything from wood to pan, but nothing seemed to fit. Tuppence was growing frustrated, but her determination never wavered. The riddle was a puzzle, and she refused to let it slip away. Then it hit her like a bolt of lightning. "Potatoes," she cried, her face lighting up with triumph. "Of course, my first you put on glowing coal, that's pot. And into it you put my whole, that's A, the first letter of the alphabet, and my third mislikes the winter blast, cold toes. It all fits." Tommy was momentarily stunned. "You've cracked it, Tuppence. But wait, potatoes, what does that have to do with the treasure?" Tuppence grinned mischievously. "I know it seems odd, but trust me, remember the recipe for new potatoes we found in that pile? Maybe this isn't about the treasure we were expecting. Maybe it's something even more valuable hidden right under our noses." With renewed hope, they dug through the box once again. This time, when Tommy unearthed the recipe for to keep new potatoes, it seemed almost too perfect. The riddle's answer wasn't just leading them to a hidden fortune, it was guiding them to something far more mysterious. What they had originally assumed was a simple treasure hunt had evolved into a much darker and deeper quest. The cryptic riddle, with its playful rhyme and seemingly innocent imagery, had opened the door to an entire web of secrets, and now the true mystery was just beginning. As the cold wind howled through the garden, Tuppence felt the pulse of excitement rise in her chest. The riddle had led them to this very moment, and the thrill of discovery was almost too much to bear. "This is it, Tommy," she gasped. "The treasure is buried here, in the garden, hidden in a tin." Tommy stared at her in disbelief, the weight of their long, exhausting search almost too heavy to fathom. "But we asked the gardener," he protested. "He said there was nothing buried here." Tuppence smiled, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Yes, but you see, Tommy, people rarely answer directly, they respond based on what they think you mean. The gardener would never admit to burying anything unusual. What we need to do is ask him about the potatoes." The following morning on Christmas Eve, they set off to find the gardener's cottage. The air was thick with the crisp chill of winter, and the streets felt deserted as if the world itself was holding its breath. After a short but pleasant chat with the old man, Tuppence casually dropped the topic. "I've always wondered," she began, "what do people around here do with new potatoes? Ever heard of them being buried in tins to keep them fresh?" The gardener nodded slowly, his face lighting up with the memory. Miss Deneen used to do that right by the fir tree. Every summer, she'd bury 3 tins, and then forget all about them come winter." Tuppence exchanged a triumphant glance with Tommy. The pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. With their information in hand, the two of them slipped away, a plan beginning to take shape. "And now for Monica," Tommy said, still unsure of their next step, but Tuppence had already thought ahead. "You have no flair for drama, Tommy. Leave it to me. Let's get a spade." The spade was procured with surprising ease, and that night, under the cover of darkness, they crept into the grounds of the Red House. The spot by the fir tree was easy to locate, and Tommy wasted no time, his spade cutting into the earth with precise practiced movements. After a few minutes of laborious digging, the distinct metallic clink rang out, and a biscuit tin emerged from the cold, dark soil. Tuppence eagerly tore at the tin, ripping away the plaster seals with Tommy's knife, but her excitement quickly deflated as she peered inside. The tin was full of potatoes. "What?" she exclaimed, dumping them out in frustration. "There's nothing at all." Tommy gritted his teeth. "Keep digging, Tuppence. There's got to be more." They moved to the next spot, the chill seeping into their bones as they dug relentlessly. The second tin surfaced, and once again potatoes were the only contents. "No, no, no," Tommy growled, slamming the spade into the ground in frustration. Tuppence, ever the optimist, tried to console him. "Don't worry, Tommy. The third time's a charm, remember." But even she was beginning to doubt. This had all felt like a wild goose chase. The third tin appeared at last, and Tuppence, exhausted but hopeful, opened it eagerly. "Potatoes again," she began, but then stopped, her heart racing. The tin was indeed filled with potatoes, but there was something else hidden beneath the layers. Carefully, she pulled out an old velvet bag, its rich texture giving off a hint of its age. "Tommy," she cried, her voice trembling, "look, we've found it." Without a second thought, Tommy grabbed the bag, his hands numb from the cold. "Let's get out of here," he urged. "It's freezing, and who knows what we've just uncovered. We've got to get this to Monica." They moved quickly, hearts pounding, minds racing with the implications of what they had just found. The treasure was within their grasp, and yet there was an unsettling feeling in the air. What did this velvet bag hold? And more importantly, what was it leading them to next? The frosty air bit at tuppence and Tommy's skin as they made their way through the deserted streets, their footsteps muffled by the fresh snow. Every part of the night felt electric with the tension of what they had just uncovered, and yet the mystery was far from over. The bag, a seemingly innocuous object, had been their guiding star through a maze of deception, secrets, and forgotten histories. Their hearts pounded in sync as they hurried to the small inn where their plan would finally come to fruition. Tommy, breathing heavily from the run and the digging, cast a glance at Tuppence, who couldn't suppress her growing excitement. The night had been long, and the cold was beginning to seep through their clothes, but it was nothing compared to the burning curiosity that kept them on their toes. As they burst through the door to their room, Tommy gave Tuppence a knowing look, his breath visible in the frigid air. "This is it," he said, his voice low but filled with a sense of triumph. "The treasure's here, Mrs. Beresford. Time to see what's inside." Tuppence, her fingers slightly trembling with anticipation, tore open the wrapping of the first parcel. She could feel the weight of it in her hands, and the slight rustling of the contents heightened her tension. Beneath the oil silk, the luxurious chamois leather bag awaited them. Tuppence, with her swift hands, unfastened it, revealing the gleam of gold sovereigns. They spilled out like rain, their bright faces catching the light from the lamp, their edges worn but still radiant. £200, Tommy remarked. His eyes scanned the coins for any signs of value beyond their face value, but all he saw was the quiet assurance that this was just the tip of the iceberg. However, Tuppence wasn't content with just the gold. She carefully moved aside the coins, and began to unravel the next surprise, a thick bundle of tightly folded banknotes. Tommy's eyes widened as they counted them, 100, 200, 300, until they reached the final total, £20,000. "Whoa!" Tommy exclaimed, wiping his brow. "This is unbelievable. I thought we just stumbled onto a hidden stash, but this is real wealth. Monica's future is saved." Just when they thought they'd seen the last of the treasures, Tuppence's nimble fingers dug further into the package, unearthing something more unexpected, a velvet pouch. Her hands trembled as she slowly opened it, revealing an exquisite string of pearls, each one more lustrous than the last. They were not the cheap imitation pearls one might find in a market. These were real, stunningly flawless, and they glistened under the light, as if alive with a strange silent power. Tommy's voice faltered as he stared at them. "Those must be worth at least £5,000, he said, his tone tinged with disbelief. The old lady wasn't just hiding money, she was securing her entire future in these jewels. The full weight of what they had uncovered finally sank in. Monica had been given a lifeline, hidden away in an old lady's secret stash. She must have liquidated all her assets, Tuppence whispered, a deep sense of awe creeping into her voice. Her savings, her investments, everything turned into gold, into jewels. Tommy smiled, but it was a bittersweet smile. The world was full of people who lived in fear of losing their fortune, but here they were, finding not only wealth but the key to a woman's peace of mind. "Now we can give her the future she deserves," Tuppence said softly, her heart swelling with satisfaction. "She can marry him, the young man she loves, and build a life together." Tommy's eyes softened as he gazed at her. "And we can go on with our adventures," he said. "But Tuppence, I don't know what I'd do without you." His voice grew quieter, more serious. "You've been my partner through all of this, the mysteries, the danger, the surprises, and you've always kept us on track." Tuppence smiled back at him, a flicker of tenderness in her eyes. "And you, Tommy, are the only one who can make everything seem like an adventure, no matter how cold or dangerous it gets." The moment of softness between them was interrupted by the distant toll of midnight ringing from the church bell. It was Christmas Eve. Tuppence glanced at the clock, and felt a lump form in her throat. "Happy Christmas, Tommy," she whispered, her voice suddenly choked with emotion. Tommy, sensing the shift in the air, smiled warmly, his own heart swelling. "Happy Christmas, Tuppence. You've made this the best one yet." He paused, glancing at the treasures in their hands. "Monica's going to have the Christmas miracle she always needed, and we've played our part in making it happen." Tuppence nodded, the weight of the night settling in her chest. "It'll be a happy Christmas for her, and for us," she added quietly, still holding the pearls in her hand. The excitement that had fueled them throughout the night now settled into a quiet, warm contentment. "I'm glad we did this," Tommy said, his voice serious now. "But Tuppence, there's one thing I need to ask you." Tuppence groaned, rolling her eyes. "Oh no, what now?" Tommy grinned. "I have to know. How did you know Monica was a clergyman's daughter?" Tuppence raised an eyebrow, looking at him as though he should have known all along. "It was easy. I opened her letter by mistake. A Mr. Dean was father's curate years ago, and I remember he had a little girl named Monica. It wasn't hard to put two and two together." Tommy chuckled. "You really are shameless." Tuppence laughed, but her laughter was rich with affection. "You wouldn't have had it any other way, Tommy. Admit it." With a final glance at the pile of treasures, Tommy leaned back against the wall and sighed. "Merry Christmas, Tuppence." "Merry Christmas, Tommy," she replied, smiling. And as they sat together in the flickering candlelight, the last echoes of the clock struck the hour, and the world outside seemed to fall away. In that small room, filled with their secret treasures and the bond they shared, Christmas had come early, and with it, the promise of new adventures, new mysteries to solve, and the kind of happiness that only a truly remarkable partnership could bring.